Hello everyone, Professor Cicerelli. So, who versus whom? This is one of those videos where, this is one of those grammar concepts that seems to baffle people. I feel like there are people who get this and who observe this distinction, and then there are people who don't, and so they never use whom. They leave it out altogether. And so what I want to tackle in this video is explaining to you the difference between these two. And I want to do so at a little bit of a maybe advanced level so that you can understand exactly why these two pronouns are different, and so that the mistake doesn't happen anymore. So who versus whom? First thing to think about is that who and whom are pronouns that are used with people. Okay, you might hear people use that and which when referring to people, but this is incorrect. I was just listening to something the other day where I heard the person that, fill in the blank. You would never refer to a person with that. You wouldn't use that as the pronoun for a person. You'd use that with non people, but you would use who and whom with people. You wouldn't use who and whom with non people. Okay, and so what's the difference? So let's break down what who is, when to use it, and then we'll talk about whom, and then we'll have some sample sentences to look at. A good video to review, and I'll link it up there, is the video on nouns, pronouns, and verbs. Have a look at that one, because if we don't understand the subject and object case of nouns, then who and whom is going to be tricky. So check that video out. I posted it a couple weeks ago on nouns, pronouns, and verbs, and just listen to the first half of it. That gets into the nouns and pronoun stuff. All right. So when you're using who, think about who as being in the subject case. All right. So when you're using who, the short and sweet way to think of it is that because who is in the subjective case, or what's sometimes called the nominative case, you should be able to substitute in subject pronouns in place of it, and have the sentences make sense. So our subject pronouns, words like he, she, they, we, I. So that's a good test right off the bat, is to see if you could swap in a subject pronoun, and if the sentence makes grammatical sense, then chances are you need who. And when we get to whom in a second, you're going to see that whom is in the objective case. And so when you encounter whom, the good litmus test should be, can I plug in my object pronouns, him, her, them, us, etc., me? And if those make sense, then chances are you need to have the whom. Okay. But for now, let's look at who. So who, as I mentioned here on screen, who can function in two different ways. It's the same word, but it can function in two different ways. It can function as two different pronouns, sort of. It's the same pronoun who, just it functions slightly differently, so we give it two different names. So who can function as a relative pronoun, and what that means is that who can function as a pronoun that relates nouns to adjective information in a sentence. If you go back and watch that pronoun video, I lay out for you and I tell you that pronouns can either take the place of nouns, or they can describe or modify nouns. And a relative pronoun doesn't take the place of a noun, it describes or modifies. So if you look at, and specifically what it does in describing or modifying, is it connects that noun to adjective information that comes after it. Usually we're used to thinking of adjective information as coming before our noun, but when it comes to relative pronouns, the pronoun is relating the noun to adjective information that comes after it, not before it. Okay, so have a look at the two examples I have there. Okay, first sentence, John was the student who scored highest on the exam. Okay, so if you look at that sentence, you should notice a couple of things. One is that John is a person, so we're good. We're using the right pronoun. The student who scored highest on the exam. Now I underline, I put our pronoun who in red, and I underlined certain information. Now, why do you think I underlined that information? It's the adjective information, right? It's the adjective information that is connected to the student. This isn't just any student. This is the student who scored highest on the exam. Okay, so think of who as this connector that is relating the adjective information scored highest on the exam to the student. Okay, you'll also notice, as I said with our test with that who exists in what's called the subject case, that if I chopped off everything before who, you'd see that I can plug in any subjective pronoun here and it would work, right? He scored highest on the exam, she scored highest on the exam, they scored highest on the exam, I scored highest on the exam. I don't know if I said we, but they would all work, okay? And they would work grammatically because who here is acting, it's in the subjective, it's in the subject case or subjective case, and so that's why it should be who here. Okay. Look at the second sentence. It was Sally who rescued the dog. Same exact situation. I've got Sally, who's my noun, and I've got adjective information relating to her, which is that she rescued some dog. And so the way to connect or relate that adjective information to her is with that relative pronoun who. And should it be who or should it be whom? The test is, again, plug in a subjective pronoun and see if it works. And chop off everything before the red, before who. She rescued the dog, I rescued the dog, we rescued the dog, they rescued the dog. All works, right? So that's our test. So we know in both of those sentences, we know we're using who correctly. Okay. So one function of who, which again is always subjective case, it's always existing in the subjective case. One function is to relate nouns to adjective information. Okay. The other function is not to modify or describe a noun, but to take the place of a noun. And take the place of a noun specifically when it comes to questions. Okay, and this is sometimes called an interrogative pronoun. It's a pronoun used in asking questions, sometimes known as the WH pronouns: who, what, where, when. So those are those interrogative pronouns that are used in asking questions. But when it comes to who existing as an interrogative pronoun, what we're saying here is that not just that it's used in asking a question, but that it's also taking the place of a noun, not modifying, but taking the place of a noun. So just like personal pronouns could take the place of nouns, so would the interrogative pronoun here. And look at what I mean. So look at that first sentence. Do you know who ate the cookies? Okay. So if you look at this sentence, what we don't see here is we don't see who relating a noun to adjective information. What we see is a subject taken out of the sentence and being replaced with who. Okay. How do I know that? Well, look, if I said, do you know he ate the cookies? Okay. Do you know she ate the cookies? Do you know they ate the cookies? Do you know I ate the cookies? Okay. It's telling you that the who is taking the place of a noun there. Okay. And I underline the verb because it's showing you that we've got that subject pronoun who, and it's working with that verb to eat in the first sentence. And just again to reiterate, if we tried to plug in any object pronouns, we would see that it would not work. him ate the cookies, them ate the cookies, her ate the cookies, me ate the cookies. No good. Okay, what we need is the subject pronoun, and that's what we have here. Second one, who wants to eat ice cream? Same thing. I don't have my pronoun. I don't have my my pronoun of who relating adjective information to a noun. What I have it doing is replacing a noun here. So how do I know that? He wants to eat ice cream. She wants to eat ice cream. They want to eat ice cream. So it's taking the place of a noun there, and specifically, it's taking the place of a subject pronoun. All right, a little more information. I just want you to sort of conceive of what's going on here. And the second one's a little tricky, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the second one. Okay, we just saw a bunch of examples. So a bunch of examples where the who is acting as the subject of a verb. It's working alongside of a verb. If you look at most of these sentences, it's who ate the cookies, who wants to eat ice cream, who scored highest, who rescued the dog, all of that. Okay, so most of the time, I could say most of the time, when you've got the pronoun who, and you're using it correctly, it's going to be the subject of a verb. It's going to be working alongside of a verb, meaning the very next word is going to be a verb. Okay, and you could see that in the two examples I just pulled out and put there, but you can also see that in, I think, every single one of the sentences here. Okay, so most of the time it's going to be that pronoun who working with a verb right after it. Okay. Either working with a verb to connect it to adjective, the who would be working with that verb to connect that information to a previous noun, or working with the verb in the second sense here as an interrogative pronoun. Okay. But there's another possibility with the pronoun who, which is it sometimes acts as what's called a predicate nominative. Fancy grammar phrase, so I put a little asterisk next to it. All it means is, and if you've taken other grammar, and maybe I'll make a video on this. If you want a video on this, let me know, and I'm happy to make a video on it. But a predicate nominative is just another way of saying it is just the predicate of a sentence is the verb and everything after the verb. Okay, and the nominative is just the subject. Okay. And so what the predicate nominative is when you have a subject that is being redescribed in another way in the sentence. And very often, I would say almost always, what you have in between that subject and between the subject and the predicate is the verb, the linking verb, which is usually the verb to be. Okay, the verb to be is the beginning of that predicate or the information about that subject. And what a predicate nominative is when you have a subject connected to another noun, and that other noun is also a subject. If you go back and watch that video on nouns, pronouns, and verbs, again, I'll link it up here. If you go back and watch that, I mentioned specifically that linking verb to be, think of it like an equal sign. Okay, so what's on one side of it grammatically needs to be on the other side of it grammatically. And so if you look at any English sentence and you have the verb to be, there are only two things that could come after it. An adjective, I am happy, or you can have a predicate, you can have the nominative, which is I am a teacher. Okay, if I say I am a teacher, teacher in that sentence is not an object. It's actually just another way of speaking about me or the I in that sentence. Okay, so predicate nominative is just another way of describing that subject. So in that sentence, I am a teacher. The teacher is, I am the teacher. I could reverse that. The teacher is I, right? And so it sounds strange to say it that way, but what it means is that the the verb to be is an equal sign. So if I am a subject and I is the subject pronoun, then the teacher is also a subject. And so this gets, when we're using the verb, or when we're using the when we're using the pronoun who, this becomes important. Okay, so just look at examples. I have two examples of predicate nominatives up there. I am she. Okay, so if you reversed it, she's I. Okay. And then also the ocean was a danger. The ocean was a danger. Okay, but so you'll notice I could, that sentence, the ocean was a danger, I could also put after that verb to be, which was in the past tense there. I could also say the ocean was dangerous, but now I have an adjective after it. But in the case of the ocean was a danger, I have the ocean, which is my subject. I have my linking verb, which is the verb to be, or was in the past tense there. And then another subject, you could say, which is danger, a danger. Okay. So what does this mean for who and whom? What it means is sometimes you will have who that's the pronoun who that is stuck in one of these predicate nominatives. So look at an example of what I mean. They know who you are. Okay. They know who you are. Okay, now why is that? And that's grammatically correct. Now why is that grammatically correct? Let's do exactly what we did last slide. So chop off everything that comes before the red who there. And ask yourself, is it correct to say you are he or you are him? Okay, well, what did we just say? We have a predicate nominative. You is our subject. Are is our verb. And the who is another way of describing the you. Who you are. Okay. So because who is another way of describing the subject you, it also needs to be a subject. Okay, just like when I say I am she, or people sometimes say if they're picking up the phone, this is she. Okay, what we're saying there is that the subject, the you in the sentence, they know who you are. The who is another way of describing the you. Okay, and the verb are, or that's also the verb to be, is just a linking verb connecting those two subjects. Okay, we would, even though it might sound right to you, we would not say you are him, you are her, you are them. We wouldn't say that. Or I am her, I am him. You wouldn't say that, because, as I said again, think of the verb to be like an equal sign. So if one thing before the equal sign is a subject, then the other thing's got to be a subject too. Because that's why it's they know who you are and not, and we'll see why it's not whom in a second. Okay. And also notice that who is taking the place in this example. Who is taking the place of a noun also. We saw who it was. Okay, let's check it again. Delete everything before the red. It was him or it was he. It was him might sound correct to you, but as I said to you in some of my other videos, we can't go on what sounds right. Okay, so our ears are sometimes trained to speech, hearing speech, and not necessarily to the actual grammar rules. So if we look at this, it is my subject, was is my verb, it's just the verb, it's the linking verb to be in the past tense. Okay, so if it is my subject, then what comes after the it has to also be my subject, so it's got to be who. And let's check. It was he, it was she, it was they, it was me, it was I, sorry, and then it was we. Like I said, that might sound strange to you, and I have a couple examples that at the end that I think will help you with this. Okay, and if you have any, and if there are any questions about this, if you want me to give you, if you want more examples on what a predicate nominative is, leave me some comments down below, and I will make more videos on this. If people are getting it though, I want to honor that, and we'll move on. Okay, now whom. Okay, whom, as I mentioned to you, whom is that pronoun that if you don't know the difference between who and whom, it's the one you always exclude. Okay? Just because you're afraid to mess it up, etc. So it's the one we don't use. Okay? But like I said, as I said with who is the subject? Okay, who exists in the subject case, in the subjective case, and whom exists in the objective case, which means when we see whom, we should be able to plug in object pronouns. And those object pronouns, as I mentioned in that video, earlier video, him, her, them, us, me. I think I got them all. Okay. So our litmus test should be, can I plug in object pronouns where the whom is, and if I can, then it's chances are I'm using it correctly. Okay. Just like my pronoun whom also can act as a relative pronoun, meaning it relates adjective information to a noun. And it can also act as an interrogative pronoun, meaning that it takes the place of a noun and is used in a question, used in questions. So let's look at some examples. So as a relative pronoun, look at the sentence I have here, and notice what I have underlined, and notice what I've changed. I've changed the color just like I did with who. John was the student whom all of the teachers recommended. Okay. Whom all of the teachers recommended. Okay. So what are we doing here? We said it's acting. Whom in this case is acting like a relative pronoun. What is it relating? It's relating that noun student. Okay. It's relating that noun student to all of that adjective information that comes afterward. He's not just any student. He's a student all of the teachers recommended. Okay. Same thing with Sally. Okay. Sally, whom everyone hated, was at the party. Okay. So what do we got here? We've got Sally. Okay. Noun. She's also a subject in this case. And we're relating certain adjective information to her. She's not just anyone. She's that person whom everyone hates. Okay. It's telling us some more adjective information about her. And then at the end of the sentence is she's also at this party. Okay. So you could see how in those first two examples, the pronoun whom is relating nouns to adjective information. And the way to test and see that we're using them correctly is plug in some of those object pronouns. So first sentence, John was the student. Chop out everything before that. All of the teachers recommended him, or all of the teachers recommended he? Should be him. Right? All of the teachers recommended him. All of the teachers recommended her. All of the teachers recommended them. All of the teachers recommended us. All of the teachers recommended me. Okay, so every single one of those sentences that makes grammatical sense was when I plugged in the object pronoun in place of whom. Okay? Let's try it out with Sally. Delete everything that comes before whom, which is just Sally. Everyone hated she, or everyone hated her? Her, right? Everyone hated her, everyone hated him, everyone hated me, everyone hated us. Okay? So plug in those, and you'll see when you plug in those object pronouns, they make the grammatical sense. Because as we said, whom exists in the object case. All right, so that first example is where whom is acting like a relative pronoun. The second way that it functions is as an interrogative pronoun, which, as we said, is not where that pronoun is modifying or describing a noun, but where it's taking the place of a noun. Okay, so look in those two sentences. Whom did you vote for? Whom did you see? Okay. You're seeing in both cases that whom there is it's not relating any adjective information to any other noun. It's replacing a noun. Okay? Whom did you vote for? I voted for him. I voted for her. I voted for them. Whom did you see? I saw him. I saw her. I saw, Jimmy, whoever. But what is important there is that whom is replacing a noun that would be there. And that noun that would be there is an object. It's got to be in the object case. Him, her, them, us, etc. Okay? Let's move on. Like I said, if you've got questions, leave them down below for me. I've been pretty good. I've been encouraged by people leaving questions down below, and we'll try to answer them like within a couple hours. So if you have some questions, leave them for me. Okay. So just like who had two ways that it pops up in a sentence, so too does whom. Whom will exist. I don't know if I want to say more, because with whom, usually who is existing more often as the subject of a verb. With whom, I don't know that I want to say it exists more as the object of a verb. It's maybe a 50-50 split. I don't know. It's hard to say. But what I want you to notice is that there is some verb that is because if it's the object of a verb, then there is some verb that is acting upon it. Okay? Some verb that's acting upon it. Because that's what an object is. If you need the refresher, watch that video. And also with the second one here, with objects in a prepositional phrase, if you need to review what a prepositional phrase is, go back and watch. I'll link it up here also. Go back and watch that video on prepositional phrases. I just put it up not that long ago. Okay, so object of a verb. What do we mean? Well, let's look at it. Okay. The scientists whom she trained were at the event. Okay. Now, do you notice in this sentence, whom is relating? So it's acting like a relative pronoun here. Okay. It's relating scientists to information about scientists. She trained them. Okay. But you'll notice in even more detail that verb trained is acting upon whom? She trained them. And who is them? Them is the scientists. She trained them. She trained her. So the reason I underline trained is because it is the verb that's acting upon the object, which is whom here. Same thing with second sentence. Whom did you see? As I pulled from the previously. I underlined see because see is the verb that is acting upon the object, which is whom. Okay? I saw him, I saw her, I saw them. Okay? So think of, I don't know if I did a video on direct and indirect objects, but I can do one if you want. But see is the verb that's acting directly upon the object of whoever whom is, right? Many people, it's an individual person, but it's the object that is the verb is acting upon that object. Okay. Second case you will have with the second situation you will have with the pronoun whom is where it's acting as an object in a prepositional phrase. Like I said, go back and review that video for a prepositional phrase, what they are, where they are, etc. But, I'm getting sun in my eyes here. Sun's coming out. Nice day. So I mentioned to you in that prepositional phrase video that you will never find the subject of a sentence in a prepositional phrase, which tells you everything you need to know about whom. If it's a part of a prepositional phrase, it can't possibly be a subject, because you can never find subject in a prepositional phrase. You will always find an object in a prepositional phrase. So a prepositional phrase will begin with a preposition, to, for, under, above, below, etc. And then it will be followed by an object. Okay? So into the woods, on the table. So on, preposition, table is my object. Okay, so let's look at these two sentences and see how that pronoun whom is stuck in a prepositional phrase. So John was the student to whom we were introduced. John was a student to whom we were introduced. Could you also say John was the student whom we were introduced to? You could. There's some general disagreement about this grammar point that not to end sentences in prepositions. My take on that, and I mean I could do a whole video on this, is that there are sometimes where it makes sense not to end a sentence in a preposition, but there are other times where moving that preposition into this, integrating it into the sentence, as you see here, here it's fine, but I think there's sometimes where if one were to move that preposition and try to integrate it into the sentence, it makes the sentence just tangled and hard to say. So there's sometimes where I'd be okay with ending a sentence in a preposition. I'm not one of those English professors that thinks that you should never end a sentence in a preposition, or you always should. It's, to me, the sound of the sentence is important. So John was the student to whom we were introduced. So let's look. So delete everything before the whom. Well, not before the whom, but before the underlined part. Okay. So what are we left with? We were introduced to fill in the blank. Him. We were introduced to him. We were introduced to her. We were introduced to them. What that tells you is to whom is a prepositional phrase, and what needs to be in place of whom is an object pronoun. So it's not John was the student to who we were introduced. No good. Because I would not say we were introduced to he. We were introduced to she. We wouldn't say that. We were introduced to him. So like I said, John was the student to whom we were introduced, if you don't want to end that sentence in a preposition, or if you think it's not that big of a deal in this case, and I'm not sure it is a big deal in this case, then John was the student whom we were introduced to. Both are okay. Okay, same one. We've got, so what's our prepositional phrase? Well, we got a couple prepositional phrases, but what's the one where I've got my pronoun? Whom. Okay, it's the one that I've underlined for you. So Sally, for whom we bought the gift, was at the party. Okay, so let's look at it. Delete everything before it. We bought the gift for blank. Does he work there, she work there, or does her work there? Okay. We bought the gift for her, we bought the gift for him. What that tells you is I need an object, okay? And as we said, whom is the pronoun that exists in the object case. Okay? So Sally, for whom we bought the gift, was at the party. You might be thinking to yourself, and maybe you are, that couldn't I just say, as in the earlier, not in this, so much in the second. You could look at some of the second sentences too, but you might be asking yourself, couldn't I just say, for example, in that first sentence, couldn't I just say the scientists she trained were at the event? Couldn't I just say the scientists she trained were at the event? Yeah, you could. You wouldn't be able to say, you would not be able to just chop out whom in the second sentence. But in many cases, that pronoun, if it's a relative pronoun, if it's acting like a relative pronoun, which the scientists whom she trained, there it is. In many cases, you can chop out a relative pronoun and the sentence still makes grammatical sense. That's the case with that. That's the case, I don't think with which, but that's the case with that, and that's the case with who and whom. Sometimes you can chop them out and the sentence is totally fine. Other times you won't be able to. Okay, and I could do a whole separate video on that, in which and when you don't need the relative pronoun. But for now, just notice that there are gonna be some times where you cannot get rid of it. But I could, and in underneath the number 2 here, John was the student we were introduced to. Couldn't I just say John was the student we were introduced to? Yeah, you could say that if you're okay with leaving that pronoun to at the end of the sentence. John was the student we were introduced to. Then that's fine. You could chop out the pronoun. Okay, you could chop out, and again, there it's acting like a relative pronoun. Okay, he's the student to whom we were introduced. It's telling you information about him. It's relating adjective information about the student. So there are going to be some times where you can chop it, other times where you won't be able to. Okay, let's look at some sample sentences. And I'll do the first two, and then I'm going to go through the last three, and I'm going to put polls up on screen and see what people think. So be paying attention and be ready. Okay. So John was exactly who or whom we were expecting to arrive. Okay, think about that for a second. Okay, let's do what we've been doing. Chop at everything before it. We were expecting to arrive. We were expecting him, or we were expecting he to arrive. We were expecting him to arrive. Therefore, what should it be? Whom. Okay. John was exactly whom we were expecting to arrive. We were expecting him to arrive. Okay. And whom here is taking the place of a noun. So it's not acting like a relative pronoun here. It's acting to replace a noun. Second one, and then we'll do the last three, and we'll have you guys vote. Who or whom knows when he's going to be here? Who or whom knows when he's going to be here? Now, couple things. Maybe you noticed this. Maybe you noticed this. What immediately follows that who or whom? It's a verb, right? To know. The verb to know. So what does that tell you? What that tells you is it cannot be an object. Okay, because I can't have an object that is bringing about some verb. Okay, remember, objects, if you go back to that video I recorded, objects receive action from verbs. They don't initiate or start, they don't initiate action. They receive action. Okay, so subjects initiate action. So because subjects initiate action, I need the subject form of that pronoun, which is who, right? Who knows when he's going to be here? He knows when he's going to be here. They know when he's going to be here. I know when he's going to be here. We know when he's going to be here. Right? All of those I just plugged in are subjects. Okay? And those are the ones that make grammatical sense. Him knows when he's going to be here. Her knows when he's going to be here. No good. Okay? So let's do the last three and I'll have you guys vote. So the team, all of who or all of whom were tired, fell asleep on the bus. Vote up there. Okay. Sally is the applicant. Who or whom we believe will approve our sales. Vote. What do you think? Okay. Last one. She wore a disguise, but he could tell who or whom she was. Vote up. See what you think. So who or whom? Okay. I'm going to look at the how people voted, and I'll come back and I'll let you guys know what those last three are. But I appreciate it. If you need any more clarification on this, leave me a comment. Actually, what I'll do, rather than making another video to tell you guys what the answers are to those last three, uh, I'll pin my comment down below, and you can see where they are. Don't look, don't cheat. Try to guess, and then once you've guessed, check out my comment. I'll pin my comment, and you can see what the answer to all three of those are. Okay, thanks everybody.